Welcome to the Questionistas podcast. I'm Thomas.
And I'm Spencer.
Quick disclaimer, this is for education and entertainment purposes only. If you need help, please see a professional. We are not experts, doctors, nor dragons, nor do we give medical advice. Take our words with a gallon of salt.
I really wish I was a dragon. Thomas, what's the question today?
The question is, why should I not fear failure?
So we're talking about failure in general. We talked about feedback the last couple of weeks, and ultimately feedback comes through failure.
At least one type of feedback. Like when we were talking about the learning process, which we'll touch on again in a little bit. So the associative step of the learning process is where you're trying different things and seeing how they work. And so either they work and that's a positive reinforcement, positive feedback, or they don't work and that's a negative reinforcement or feedback.
Which I think is ultimately the first question here is failure bad? Is that negative response or that negative feedback that you're getting a bad thing? And I think I've seen it even to the point where we talk about evil, that failure is evil and failure is wrong morally. So
And it's kind of used as like an inherent like value. Like you're saying, you are good, you are bad, you are evil, you are righteous. They imply, well, first off, an inherent, like within your essence or within something's essence, gosh, whether it deserves to live or exist or not.
Yeah. Which is a really dangerous place, and I know both personally if I think that way, but also just thinking, especially if I'm giving feedback and I say, well, you did this wrong, and not only did you did this wrong, but you are wrong. Both advice that I've tried to apply as much as possible with raising my kids is, you did something that was incorrect or hurtful, but you are not a bad person. You're not the sum of the few things that you did today. Right.
That reminds me of one of the really important things to me, which is the fixed versus growth mindset.
Okay.
And they have to do with learning and personal growth. And the fixed mindset is where you think everyone has defined traits. I'm smart. I'm dumb. I'm clever. I'm introverted. I'm outroverted.
You're just so talented.
You're just so talented. Oh, that word. That word. Oh, Spencer doesn't know this. I guess he knows now. That is like a trigger word for me. Because when people say you're so talented, I'm like, I worked my butt off to get good at this. And yeah, and everyone has, different initial, I'll call them like genetic proclivities that they're working with. Right?
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that, just because it takes some people different lengths of time to achieve or learn something doesn't mean that most people can't learn it.
And it feels like a lot of my undergrad in art and sculpture was this problem of being called talented quite often, where it's like, no, do you know how many times I spent failing in the workshop trying to create this thing, and then I finally, once I finally figured it out, I was able to not necessarily fail, complete the project, and then present it to you, and then you see all you see is the completed project, and you go, aha, this person is successful. And maybe that's another, we're talking about these dichotomies of negative and positive, good and evil,
success and failure,
of the only person that's failing means that they're not succeeding. And that's not necessarily true. It's sometimes your failure is ultimately what you end up presenting, and it's still successful, because that's what the accumulation of failures is what you've presented, and it's successful by itself.
So there's this idea when we say that things are good and bad, that we're saying that it's like something to be avoided and it's something that's awful, that if you make a mistake, then yeah, you're a failure. I'm kind of repeating myself, but
It's a moral failing. It's a moral failing.
yes, it's a moral failing. I think that's a really good way to put it.
That ultimately it's something inherently wrong, and associating failure to your activity and your action and not to yourself is where the danger lies, or vice versa. Associating it to yourself and identifying as a failure is where that danger is.
Yeah. So there are a lot of things that we do that cause us pain and suffering because we think that failure, mistakes, flaws, errors, that those are all evils that need to be avoided at all costs. Like, oh, if I just fail at this, it's just going to be the worst thing. And there's a couple of ways that this manifests. One of them is, it's called the sunk cost bias.
Okay.
It's where you invest time, effort, and money into something, and you don't want to let it go. You're like, well, then that would have all been a waste. That would be a failure. That was time spent that I should not have spent on that. So and this is happening even at least half subconsciously. So you're like, so your brain's like, well, I got to protect my feelings and my self-confidence. So I'm going to try to justify what I was doing in any way possible. And one day I wrote a little parable, joke, story, whatever. Once there was a foolish man who embarked on a path to the Golden City. After several miles, he learned that he was not on the road to the Golden City. Since he was a fool, he chose to continue on that path. For everyone knows, once begun, a path must be finished, right? His obsession with the path blinded him to his goal. Was the goal to walk a path without leaving it? Or was the goal to arrive at the Golden City? Unfortunately, he was set upon by wild beasts and torn to pieces. But at least he stuck to the road, right?
So there, I want to challenge something that you did in that parable, and at the very beginning you called him a foolish man. you primed the audience for what he did was foolish, or that he was a foolish man.
That's a good point.
And I'm not saying you're wrong. I want you to keep it, but at some point we have to remember and catch ourselves with our value statements that we do about ourselves and about people, that we've already established someone as a fool, and being set upon wild beasts is the most Thomas thing ever, because it leads to, who cares whether he got the wrong path or not. He was set upon by wild beasts, but there's
he did.
The two options here being, was it walking the path was more important than getting to the Golden City? We've primed the audience to tell them that he's foolish for not seeking the Golden City. And sometimes maybe walking the path is what's most important. So
I like that. I think the main goal of the metaphor, maybe I'm getting defensive.
Yeah, get it.
The main goal of the metaphor is, if you have a goal, like, I want to go out to the movies and have a good time, and you go and you start watching a movie, and 15 minutes into it, you're like, this is trash, I want to leave. You're confronted with a choice. Do I stay in this movie theater because I made all the effort of coming here, of getting the ticket, of walking into this theater, of finding my seat and sitting down and watching the first 15 minutes? Or do I leave?
Which it's a really weird, I don't think it's a paradox, but it's I've had that happen recently where we were watching a movie and I was like, I don't know about this movie. This is weird. This is not what I was expecting. It's like, do I give this a chance and I try it and calculate my time? Is my time valuable enough that that 1 hour lost to me is so valuable that I don't want to fill it with junk and the risk of this being junk? Or do I give this a chance and I allow it to go? I think the sunk cost fallacy or the sunk cost bias gets even more challenging when it's more than just $15. It's I've bought a house and every couple months something bad happens and I have sunk $50,000 in this house because of all this stuff. You know, that becomes a much bigger sunk cost. And maybe you're not tolerant of $15 because that is your entertainment budget for the entire month. And so not to diminish, such a small amount, but
Yeah.
$15, $50,000, or 6 months of my life, or even worse, I have been in this career for 20 years. Am I willing to change and start over again? Because I don't like this anymore. And I've met multiple people, and funny enough, I admire them beyond belief. They're some of the most admirable people that I've met, where they just said, I don't enjoy what I'm doing. And it's like, but you've spent so much of your time. And it's like, yeah, but I've kind of plateaued and not going to be able to make any more money. And ultimately I'm just not happy doing what I'm doing. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to go back to school.
Well, that's
And
interesting because there's a few potential reasons that they could be feeling that way.
yeah,
Not to get too far in the weeds on this, but when it comes to like failure or negative feelings and stuff like that, if you treat them as something to be avoided at all costs, then you might get to that situation and be like, oh man, yeah, I need to go change my career. But what if you like need more sleep? What if you need more exercise? What if you need to not need to, but what if you could find more ways to make your job interesting? Or, you just accept that feeling unsatisfied is a part of the human experience. I'm not saying that them going back to school is the wrong idea. I'm just saying that it is uh
it's not
one
available to everyone.
yeah, well, for one, it's not available to everyone. And for two, it's not necessarily the right choice for everyone. You might just have to learn to live with that feeling of dissatisfaction.
Do you think that that ties in with the other bias that you've gotten noted here, but self-handicapping bias, where you're purposely creating obstacles and excuses to blame when you fail?
I like that one. That one is it's not only like being afraid of failure, but it's like failure's coming or you feel like it's coming. So you set up something, usually something external or something in your way, external to be the scapegoat. Because heaven forbid you be responsible for a failure. That would just ruin your self-confidence. So it's like, you know what? I couldn't really do that because, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of a good example right now. No, I can't come up with any.
I think that goes both ways. You've got this quote from my one of my leaders of thought, Jean-Luc Picard, Captain Jean-Luc Picard.
Captain Jean-Luc.
It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not a weakness, that is life. And so there's times when it's not your fault. Just bad situations happen. Circumstances are the way they are. Choices are made by people that affect you, and there's nothing you could do about it. And anything that you were as a person or did not affect that choice. That it's just happened, and you blame yourself. And you've decided that you as a better person are bad or evil or wrong, or I should have clipped my toenails more often. That would have saved me from this grief. And sometimes that's just what it is. But then the opposite is, yeah, and actually your toenails are nasty and you should have flip them more often, and that did
So that
affect
brings
their
us
choice.
to our things in a prior episode. What to do when you don't know what to do. It's like, clip your toes now.
Yeah.
Like, the only thing kind of brings me to a really good tool called radical acceptance.
Yeah, tell me about that.
That's radical acceptance is practicing just taking the world and the universe as it is and just accepting it. All the good, all the bad, everything. And accepting, it's not necessarily accepting it meaning saying, I will accept it all as good. You're accepting it all as what is.
Okay.
Instead of bashing your head against the wall on what it should be, you're just like, okay, here's what it is. So the reason that's important is that there are things in our lives that are unavoidable. And for example, failure is one of them. You are going to have times where you're going to fail over and over and over and over again. We'll talk about why failure is actually critical in a minute. But if something is unavoidable or going to be in your life all the time, like failure, is it better to flip out constantly about it or learn to roll with it?
Sure.
Is it better to lament that, you know, everybody won't stop being idiots and won't just change their mind to your political point of view? Or is it better to learn to roll with the fact that people don't just change their minds because you share a fun meme on Facebook about how certain political parties are dumb? That's me thinking about some of our background notes for this. But either way, the point I'm trying to make is if something is unavoidable, learn to accept it as what is, and then learn to deal with it and make the most of it.
And I've talked about this before. That's spiritual health. Mm-hmm. That capacity to acknowledge what you can't control and acknowledge what you can control, and being able to distinguish the two, and being able to not just acknowledge, but, you know, handle how that affects you, and how you can accept that this is unavoidable, but here are my options. Here's what I can do.
I like that. So then, 2 things. Oh yeah, go ahead.
What are your 2 things?
Oh, I was just going to say, we've talked about, is failure bad? I mean, kind of, yeah, but is bad bad? Is bad something evil? No, it's just there. Is failure avoidable? No, it's not avoidable. It's going to happen. So might as well learn to roll with it. Which kind of brings us to our last segment, I'll say, for this episode, which is failure necessary?
I feel like I need to answer that just because you asked it. It's like,
isn't that the great thing about questions?
Right?
I wrote this, what is it I wrote the other day? Like, questions are the ultimate form of cognitive violence, because if you ask somebody a question, their brain can't but help to try to answer.
Yeah. And I feel like the thing I want to challenge, or at least I'm still getting caught up in at the beginning of this conversation, is that dichotomy, is that good and evil, or that right and wrong of the word failure. And so, is failure necessary? Or are you trying to ask me some existential ethical dilemma of, is right and wrong necessary? And that's not what you're asking.
I don't know.
And I don't, but I think I want to point out that's not what I want to be asking when we say, is failure necessary? What I want to be asking is the event of attempting to do something and it didn't work out the way you expected necessary?
And I guess there's kind of a follow-up question. Necessary for what?
Sure.
Brings us kind of a little bit back to goals and stuff. But I mean, even if we go back to some basic goals of humans, which is to live, to be happy, to help our families and our loved ones, to learn things, to grow, is failure necessary to achieve those things? Or can you achieve those things without any failures happening ever?
I feel like I'm struggling logically. Well, emotionally I'm struggling. Logically, I know the difference between failure as an event in which something you attempted didn't turn out the way you wanted it to. But it's so tied to, if you're not careful, the sense of self, that I had a goal and I didn't make that goal achievable, or I didn't complete it on the first attempt. And I think that of itself is a problem. And it's like, why do we think that your goal is achievable on the first attempt? Why should we allow ourselves to be able to accomplish something the first time without ever experiencing it? And it's not anything that that is super intellectual, or it's just sometimes the most valuable events that are most memorable to me are the failures, not because they're bad, but because that's where I learned, that's where I grew the most. And so, is failure necessary at face value, without worrying about good and evil, without worrying about moral failings? Yeah, it's totally necessary, because that's where the growth happens, and that's where the goals are going to be met, because goals aren't meant to be met on the first attempt.
Yeah, well, it's like you have to, when it comes to goals and things like that, you can't narrow it down to the context of an attempt. Like when you say, I'm going to try to shoot this basketball, and you shoot it and you miss, I have failed. It's like, wow, you just took the entire experience of learning how to shoot basketballs and narrowed it down to one toss.
Right.
And when you take it to the bigger context, and I'll talk about why it's not only like unavoidable, but it's necessary, it's critical for the learning process, meaning failing is what makes the process work. And there's two parts to that I want to talk about. First one has to do with learning. I'm going to shift to what we're doing just for a second. First part is learning, and the second part is talking about anti-fragility.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about meditation. But so when you're learning something, talking about learning ideas or concepts, it works with physical actions too, but you study something, and then like you test yourself to try to remember it, try to pull it from your memory. You struggle, and then you fail to remember it. And you're like, ah, dang it, I couldn't remember what was on the other side of that flashcard. And so you look at the other side of that flashcard. The fact that you just failed to remember it tells your brain to make the connection stronger when you review it again.
Yeah.
That connection doesn't get... One of the most important ways for a connection to get stronger in your brain is for that connection to fail to happen. So this is an example of learning doesn't work without you failing to remember something. So it's like you didn't fail to learn and now you're succeeding at learning. It's so hard to explain this. That's why, like, the word failure just feels like icky to me because of all the negative connotations that come with it. It's like, especially with that example, it's like, no, that's literally how it works.
So let me give you an example, and I think one of the ways that it wasn't icky. I went golfing. I got to do, it's called the scramble.
Now that's
so basically,
icky.
Yeah, golfing is
Just
icky.
kidding.
No,
Just kidding. Go ahead.
it's honestly it's really fun. I just don't have I the I don't know. I don't do it as nowhere near as often as my coworkers did. Let's just put it that way. So I
I'm
go out
sorry,
and play with
I
them.
derailed you. Go ahead.
Yeah, but it's both of them were really good golfers. They not ever once missed the ball on the tee. And that's like my big fear, right? So don't fail, don't swing and miss the ball. That's all I'm worried about. So I'm studying something. I watched both of them go first, and they both go first, and I'm like, okay, I see where their elbows are at. I see where their knees are at. I see where how far they are from the. Okay, I'm studying it. Okay, I'm gonna try to remember that. Okay, I'm sitting there, and I'm struggling to remember all that stuff while I'm sitting there holding the golf club, and I swing and I just whiff it. And I thought I heard them laughing, but I didn't. If I remember correctly, I didn't hear them laughing, and they could have. And this is that key point of that failure. They could have, and immediately one of the guys came in and he knew exactly what was happening. He understood these steps, and he said, "Spencer, I want you to put your hands here. I want you to do this. That's all you need to worry about. You are swinging for the fences. Don't worry about that. What I want you to do is I want you to hit 100-yard drives." He's like, "Yes, we're hitting 300-yard drives. You are hitting 100-yard drives because you're going to focus on this and this instead." And I say, "Okay." And I reviewed and I repeated and I tried the three things he said, and I whacked that ball 100 yards. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, that was amazing." And it was such a that point of failure where review happened right afterwards involved him being very kind, being very generous, being very patient, and not laughing, right? And so I think that was a very fundamental aspect to me having a great rest of the day, because I was driving the ball 100 yards every single time while they were driving at 300. And they never once were frustrated with me after that, because they were there to they understood where I was in the game. They understood that I didn't play as often as they did, and I wanted to compete with them immediately, but it
Well, it
allowed
seems
me
like their
to.
skill level, they didn't get egotistical about it either.
Not at all, not at all. And they could have, and they should have. And no, I
I
take
don't
that
know if they
back. They
should have.
shouldn't have. They shouldn't have. And that, but that made all the difference. That linchpin was the review point where I didn't get mad at myself. I did for a second. I'm like, "Oh, I'm an idiot. I can't believe this. This is going to be a terrible day." But he jumped in and he broke that mindset from me. And he said, "No, this is what you're going to be thinking about. And this is what your goal is today." And he readjusted my goals. He said, "Just today, you're not going for the Golden City. You're just walking. And you're not going to be a fool for just wanting to walk, because sooner or later, you're going to figure out how to walk better, and the Golden City will get there." You know, so that
Oh,
those steps, I
yeah.
want to review them. Study something, try to remember it, struggle, fail, review, repeat. I would argue that fail and that review are the most important to give yourself and to give others when they're going through those steps, that grace.
Yeah, we talked about it in our feedback episode. We were talking about feedback cycles, and we often have the instinct to use one type of conditioning, which is punishment for doing something bad,
Right.
where there are like 6 or more types of conditioning that are available.
Yeah.
And even then, well, just the very act, it's like when a kid does something bad and you want to get mad at them, but it had such bad consequences and they feel like garbage already. You're just kind of like, you know what? I think they've either reality or they have taken care of the quote unquote punishment or the negative feedback for this experience. Like I don't even need to say anything, because they've already gone through the garbage emotions, or I don't necessarily want to call them garbage. I'm being evaluative there, but they did something and it made them feel unpleasant.
Yeah.
Now,
And,
there
and
might be other times that you need to bring other feelings of unpleasantness because they're actions that will that have a long feedback loop. Like, I'm going to not pay attention in school. That has a for the biggest impacts, that's got a long feedback loop.
well, there's been times where my kid will spills the milk in the kitchen. I I don't know if that's ever literally happened, but it's an event that occurs and they make a mistake and they failed at what they were trying to do. And I look at them and they look at me like, "Oh my gosh, dad's going to start yelling." And I try really hard not to. Maybe I have, but the times that I hope for are the times where I look at them and I say, "Did you learn what you should do better next time?" And they go, "Yep." And it's like, "Okay, then let's clean it up and let's try again." You know,
I've learned how to be better at that than I used to be.
and it that failure in doing the wrong thing with being a parent is something that's really hard because it's like
Failure is unavoidable.
yeah,
There's no book you can read. There's nothing you can do that'll make it so that you have been the perfect parent.
but it's this meta upon meta idea of like trying to help them understand, okay, you failed, did you learn something good, let's move on, let's try again, let me help you. That notion of grace, of giving them the patience that they deserve when learning themselves is very tricky. And that's those steps that we talked about, that comes from Dr. Polk.
It comes from a lot of cognitive science research about the learning process, but I particularly got it from this audiobook on the learning brain by I think it's Dr. Polk. I'll have to hunt it down, but yeah, that's where that comes from. So this is from cognitive science. One other thing that I think is a really important aspect about failure and success and learning is to keep things simple in our head, we often resort to absolutism, black and white, yes or no, good or bad, success or failure.
Yeah.
It's better to go from absolutism towards probabilityism. And that means Spencer just did a double take.
I'm shaking my head like probabilityism. I'm bad at statistics as it is.
Well, either way, if you treat things as, instead of, well, you succeeded at that or you failed at that, do or do not, there is no try. No Yoda. No wonder Anakin had emotional issues. Anyway.
No wonder Yoda, the leader of the entire Jedi council, failed and crumbled around him as he wasn't paying attention because he was doing or do not.
I know. Okay, tangent. Anakin goes up to Yoda. Yoda, I'm having a real hard time worrying about the people I care about. And then Yoda's like, well, just stop caring about things. Just kidding.
Wow.
That's a more negative way to put what he said, and he actually had some good points, but still, it felt like he basically tried to get him to avoid the problem rather than process it. Anyway, so from absolutism, probabilityism.
Okay.
It's the idea of success and failure. Was that action a success or a failure? Versus how effective was it? Was it really effective? Was it not very effective? Was it kind of effective? So that lets you put your actions on a spectrum, and it's not from good to bad. It's either it helped you get to your goal a lot or a little bit, or it didn't really help you, or it was detrimental. So that's another really important thing, is that you don't treat each action or each attempt as a black and white success or fail, because even then they're not. If you try to shoot a basketball and you shoot it behind you, I don't know, you picked up the ball and you threw it in the air. Like that's a measure of efficacy. I mean, you got the wrong direction, but you're it's not just a fail.
Yeah.
Gosh, even like dropping the ball, tripping on it, and landing on your face and breaking a tooth, I wouldn't even call that a fail. It's all data. Every attempt. I think that's an important thing. This is another reference to the learning process. Is everything that you try, whether it's more or less effective, is data about how the world works. So shooting the basketball from different places, hitting the golf ball with different positions, you're learning about the action and the result space, or in other words, the effectiveness of different variables. And in order to do that, you gotta go through a ton of the variables that are less effective.
Yeah. It almost feels like you have to throw the ball or shoot the ball, or I don't know basketball. Try to attempt to make a shot is every impossible way to know the right ways and I'm about to catch myself in the dichotomy in the spectrum of more effective versus less effective. And one that there's a classic example in NBA where there was a basketball player that instead of shooting free throws overhand, he shot them underhand for a whole season. This is like in the 70s, mid 70s. And his percentage was like 90%. He was far more effective. And there's a lot into why he stopped doing that, mainly because of social norms and a lot of challenges that he got pushing against the social trends. But he found a more effective way, and he employed it, and it increased his capacity and his probabilityism. What'd you call it?
Probabilityism.
Probability.
It's the absolute, or sorry, it's the opposite of absolutism.
Yeah.
So one other thing I want to talk about with that before we get to meditation,
okay,
is so Dr. Jonathan Haidt. He's a social science and psychology researcher. I was watching a presentation by him the other day, and I haven't read his book. He's got a book called, I think it's The Anxious Generation or something. And, I don't know if he's completely right or not, but one thing that he talks about is 3 types of systems and how they react when they're exposed to either stress or failure or challenge. When exposed to stress, the fragile gets weaker. The resilient stays the same. And the anti-fragile, we don't have a word for it, so they made up one, gets stronger. When not exposed to stress, the fragile stays the same, the resilient stays the same, but the anti-fragile gets weaker. So the word anti-fragile refers to systems that get weaker if they are not challenged.
Okay.
And the context that he was talking about was children. And and I know I don't want to tell people what to think, but there's a lot of cognitive science on this, and I agree with it, so I'm going to be a little bit whatever. There's 2 things that he talks about. We need to be less controlling of our children for them going out, spending time with friends, like say they want to get together with their friends and walk over to the movie theater. How young are they when you let them do that? How often do you let them do that? And then we should be restricting their social media usage, because that puts them in a constant state of social and emotional relationship management. And that's a huge burden. And that it causes, according to him, it can cause and exacerbate a lot of anxiety and other types of issues. So it's like, let your kids go out and explore more. So it's like, restrict them less on going out and about, and restrict them more on the social media aspect, because they need, it's important for them to develop like social and emotional skills. But the thing about social media is it makes it so that they're in that context all the time. And that's like when you're exercising, you exercise, the muscles break down, you give them a break, they rebuild, and then you exercise again.
And I
So
think that's the anti-fragile piece.
Yeah. Well, they call it, I don't recommend this, but what do they call it? Iron fist training, iron arm training, iron leg training. Have you heard what that is?
Where you hit someone with an iron bar? No, I don't. I've never heard this.
Oh, I'd probably do it. But you break a bone and set it multiple times so that it will grow back stronger.
Oh, geez.
I would not recommend, but that is an example. Well, it's not necessarily an anti-fragile system, but you know what? Our muscles are, our bodies are. So, kind of going back to, is failure unavoidable? Is failure necessary? Or rather, is doing things that are less effective necessary? Yeah. And again, I want to talk again about basketball because it's a great metaphor. You have all the possible places on the court that you could shoot a ball from, and all the different possible ways you could use your muscles to shoot it. And the way that you become effective is by learning not just the ways that are effective, but the ways that aren't. You start to narrow it down. Like, oh, if I pop my wrist at this point, it's not going to work. If I raise my elbow higher and then pop my fist, it's going to work better. And times that by 1,000, and luckily it's your subconscious that's learning and keeping track of these things. So either way, and I'm going to sound redundant, but doing things that are less effective, or quote failures, is a necessary part of the process to success. In order to succeed, you have to learn how to be okay with the process of learning failures or less effectiveness.
Awesome. As much as we wanted to talk about meditation related to this, I think we can hold that for another conversation, because that.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot. Yeah, I think we can hold that for another conversation. Yeah. But spoiler, failure, quote unquote, is a critical part of it.
All right. Well, keep shooting hoops, keep swinging golf clubs, and make sure that you're missing the basket a couple times so that you can figure out how to be more effective.
You don't need to make sure that you're missing the basket. It is unavoidable.
Ah.
What? Learn to roll with the punches, friends. Learn how the world works. All right, everybody, keep asking questions. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.